This is from the writings of William Cobbett in the 1800s. It's about his standing as a Member of Parliament in Manchester and Oldham, and back then you could stand in two constituencies, but the election polling day was held on different times. Here we go. I was at the opening of the elections at Manchester, where, having upon these hustings seen hooted off that very Mr. Sharp, who was the borough reeve who forbade me to enter Manchester on my return from America in 1819. I went off to Oldham, there to remain until I should come back to Manchester a Member of Parliament. The election at Manchester was doubtless greatly influenced by the election at Oldham, which was known at the former place by 12 o'clock on the first polling day, so that, after that, it was naturally to be expected that the electors of Manchester who had intended to vote for me would either transfer their votes or that they would not vote at all. Yet, in spite of this, the state of the poll at its close was as follows: Phillips, 2,923, Thompson, 2,069, Lloyd, 1,823, Hope, 1,560, Cobbett, 1,305. This result was sufficiently honourable to me. Not one single pint of beer or glass of gin had been given to any human being on my part. No attorney and no attorney's clerk had been employed, and not a single person hired, I believe, to do any one thing connected with my election. All except the mere printing and the hire of a few carriages was the effect of voluntary exertion, chiefly by young men in the middle rank of life, whose zeal and activity I never can sufficiently applaud. So much for the election at Manchester. At Oldham, the polling over on the 13th of December, when the numbers stood as follows: Fielding, 670, Cobbett, 642, Bright, 153, Burge, 101, Stephen, 3. At this election, not one single farthing's worth of victuals or drink was given to anybody, for any services whatsoever. The committee, composed of sensible and sober manufacturers and tradesmen, paid for the printing that they had done, and paid all the expenses of the hustings, polling places, clerks, etc. They paid also for the entertainment of the candidates at the hotel, and even the carriages to and from Manchester that I went in I found paid for, and not a man nor a woman in this excellent town attempted to obtain from me either money, drink, or any promise to do anything for them in their private concerns. This was purity of the election indeed. It was an honour, indeed, to represent a people like this. Neither Mr. Fielding nor myself ever canvassed in any shape or form, either individually or collectively. Neither of us ever asked the people to give us a vote, but we contented ourselves with saying that if they chose us to represent them, we would be true representatives to the best of our power. Of one thing we were both of us particularly proud, and that was that the people had the good sense, that sense of their own worth and our rights, as to scorn to attempt to chair or drag us through the streets. In my address to them, I besought them not to think of imitating the slaves of the boroughmongers. Now, I said, my friends, I shall come down from the hustings, and the first handloom weaver I meet, I shall take by the arm and walk with him to the hotel from which I came. I did this, and Mr. Fielding did the same, and thus, in this appropriate manner, we close this election, which should be an example to every borough and every county in the kingdom. Not a disturbance of any sort, not a blow given in anger, scarcely an abusive word from one person to another, not a single drunken man seen about the streets. Much singing, much playing music, much joy, much triumph, but all was at peace and decorum from the beginning to the end. As a mark of victory over the combined malignity of factions, I set a very high value upon this seat in Parliament, but I set a higher value upon its vindicating the character of the Commons or the common people. I always stood firmly in defence not only of the rights, but of the character of the common people who, of late years, were looked upon by both the political factions and by the hordes that lived upon the taxes as not being of the same flesh and blood with themselves. William Cobbett, 22nd of December 1832. Stand up for decency.